Right now, on Law&Crime Special Report, Justice and Peace. Last night, New York State Legislature passed a bill to repeal 50A. The repeal of this law will make officer disciplinary records public. The decision faces backlash from NYPD unions who claim the repeal will endanger the lives of officers.
Stop treating us like animals and thugs, and start treating us with some respect. We've been vilified. It's disgusting.
Plus, Governor Cuomo asked New York State Legislature to pass the Amy Cooper 911 false accusation bill. The bill gets its name from Amy Cooper, a white woman who called the police on a black man in Central Park claiming she was being assaulted. As we've seen numerous videos going viral showing the abuse of 911 against black and brown people, could New York be the first of many states to adopt such a law?
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Plus, an update on the George Floyd case. A former co-worker of Floyd and Officer Chauvin has come forward with new information. David Pine, who works security with both men, alleges that the two knew each other and would often bump heads.
Co-worker David Pinney is breaking his silence, telling us that the two men had a history.
Also, last night, the attorney for former Officer Thomas Lane, one of the officers involved in the murder of George Floyd, spoke to the media for the first time.
If all of these people say, why didn't my client intercede? Well, if the public is there and they're so in an uproar about this, they didn't intercede either.
Justice and Peace bringing you inside the movement for police reform. It's Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. All right, so what a show we have for you today. I want to jump right into it, starting off with this new law that's been repealed in New York State, that being 50A. Again, in the past, defense attorneys, defendants were not able to look at the disciplinary records of officers and would often go into trials or even negotiations blind, not knowing the reputation of that officer and having to fight the insurmountable evidence about how that arrest occurred and maybe the reputation of your own client. This is a huge win for defense attorneys and also allows us to, as everyone is saying, get rid of those bad apples. But let's listen to the response from the New York Police Department's PBA president, Mike O'Meara.
This isn't stained by someone in Minneapolis. It's still got a shine on it. And so do theirs. So do theirs. Stop treating us like animals and thugs and start treating us with some respect. That's what we're here today to say. We've been left out of the conversation. We've been vilified. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Trying to make us embarrassed of our profession. 375 million interactions. Overwhelmingly positive. Nobody talks about all the police officers that were killed in the last week in the United States of America, and there were a number of them. We don't condone Minneapolis. We roundly reject what he did as disgusting. It's disgusting. It's not what we do. It's not what police officers do. Our legislators abandoned us. The press is vilifying us. Well, you know what, guys? I'm proud to be a cop, and I'm going to continue to be proud to be a cop until the day I retire. And that's all I have to say.
The response affected me in a number of ways. At first, when he was describing how people are vilifying officers and calling them thugs and animals, at least for me, I thought, well, now you understand how I felt for the last 25 years of my life. But we'll put that aside for a moment. And I want to bring in two attorneys, DeWitt Lacey, a civil rights attorney, as well as Mike Corbonnet, to help me unpack this statement. First and foremost, let's start with you, DeWitt. This is a law that simply says, if you are those bad apples, then we as a society, we as defense attorneys, we as defendants should be able to see this. I don't see how this vilifies officers. The good officers don't have those records. So what's the problem here?
I agree wholeheartedly. And, it kind of mirrors some action and legislative action that was done here in California last year through Governor Newsom and the leadership of Shirley Weber here in California, in which the legislature voted and the governor signed into law an act which allows folks to examine the personnel files of officers. That includes disciplinary histories. I don't see how that's a bad thing. If officers are on the up and up and not engaged in any type of unlawful or demeaning or egregious behavior, then this shouldn't be viewed as a bad thing. So I would oppose what this officer was saying in the clip you just showed. It just seems off base. It seems extremely defensive in light of the fact that he's claiming that officers are without a need to really be viewed in this light.
Thank you. Now, Mike Korobanis, you are a New Jersey defense attorney. You've worked both representing officers, and I also want to say welcome to the Southern District of New York. I know you just got admitted a few days ago, so congratulations to you there. Let's do the counter argument, because the officers are saying, well, it's my personnel file. You have my own personal information that is going to be out there in the public. But that's what redactions are for. I don't want to know where an officer lives or their social security number or any identifying information. I just want to know if they're beating up people in the streets, and if I can show that goes against their credibility on the stand. What else are they arguing?
It's not really clear to me, Brian, because we take this as lawyers, and we're lawyers who go to court and have tried cases. I always think that a personnel file, and I think there needs to be a better definition. I agree with you. I don't want to know anything that's irrelevant to my case. I don't want to know personal information of that nature. But we have courts, we have judges, and we have judges who could decide what's relevant or not relevant. And in this time, and in any time, as a criminal defense attorney, we're always in favor of transparency. Just like if you're representing an officer who other officers are testifying against or things of that nature, I'm sure that officer would want me as his attorney to know everything in their personnel file to attack the credibility. The one thing I think that may be something to discuss is there's always that danger of frivolous claims against a police officer that maybe are not unsubstantiated or things of that nature, but that's almost becoming less relevant with social media, because if somebody has a beef with a police officer, they go to Twitter, Facebook, things of that nature, and it's out there anyway. So I just always am in favor of transparency.
Yeah. Now, 50A, before it was repealed, did allow for an exception for a court-ordered mandate for those information to be released. Defense attorneys like myself would have to file what's called Gissendaner motions. In the 6 years that I've practiced, I have filed multiple Gissendaner motions, but the reality is we as defense attorneys don't get that information. So that exception is pretty much just fluff for most of us. Let's switch gears just a little and talk about another law that was passed in Governor Cuomo's Say Their Name police reform, where he's trying to push for this Amy Cooper 911 call, where if you call the police on someone and you are lying to the police, and it is somewhat of an attack based on someone's race, religion, or creed, or protected class, they're trying to make that criminal. Let's take a look at the video that sparked the idea that this Amy Cooper 911 legislation should be passed.
Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And
me.
I'm taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in the Ramble, and there is a man, African-American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African-American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the Ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the Ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
I mean, we've seen these videos over and over and over again. It's not just that she's saying it's an African American man. And hey, that's a descriptor. That's fine. I look like an African American man. I'm a black man. I get that. It's a description officers actually ask for and is used to prosecute people. But the theatrics that come with it, the screaming and crying as if she is in the course of being assaulted, that is really where people are using these 911 calls to be destructive to people's lives, especially when they know what happens when officers get there. Mike Robotics, let's have you jump in here. I already know the law should be enforced in terms of making false claims, but that's not happening. Do you see these Amy Cooper 911 false call laws as being something that could further the progress of eliminating these types of situations?
Oh, absolutely. I think, I mean, when you think about it, all these encounters begin somewhere. And the encounter begins, first of all, the police officers are going to be dispatched to the scene. And once they're dispatched to the scene, based upon her acting, they've got a heightened sense of scrutiny when they get there. They're prepared for something that isn't happening. And it just is what triggers each and every event that likely could lead to a confrontation once the accused and the police officer meet.
And do it. This is not complaining to the manager or at Starbucks or some other kind of establishment. This has serious repercussions. And so, and also, we can look at it from both sides. It's dangerous for the officer to run guns in blazing in these types of situations. And it's obviously dangerous for those citizens who are having the police called on them falsely. Do you think that this could be something that starts in New York and maybe finds its way over to you in California?
I would love it if New York continued to show some leadership in this regard and made that a bill. And I would be happy and delighted that it would be appropriately named the Amy Cooper bill, as I think she deserves and has earned that honor. Listen, let's get at the heart of this. What it is weaponizing race. I understand, yes, race is a descriptor that might be necessary in criminal prosecution or in many variations of police work. However, what the woman simply did was weaponize race and play on old tropes of the black man coming to hurt this nice young white woman. Please come rescue me. It is a trope that is as old as time, and I hope that if a state like New York shows some leadership and makes this actually law, that other states will follow, including California. And I think something like that could definitely happen here.
Yeah, I would have thought that we would have learned this lesson back from Emmett Till, but of course, we have to revisit it over and over again, that false allegations against people of color can cause very serious reactions that amount to death. We're going to continue with more here at Justice and Peace, following up on the George Floyd case after this break. We are getting more and more information about the George Floyd case that I think at the very least raises eyebrows, but for most of us infuriates us. We're finding out that there was a deeper relationship between former officer Chauvin and George Floyd. Now, we heard rumors that they worked together in some capacity as security guard individuals at an establishment. Now, how deep that was, we didn't really know until yesterday. Let's take a look.
CBS News is learning new information about George Floyd and Derek Chauvin from a man who worked security with both of them at this nightclub in Minneapolis. Co-worker David Pinney is breaking his silence, telling us that the two men had a history.
What kind of history?
They bumped heads.
How?
It has a lot to do with Derek being extremely aggressive within the club with some of the patrons, which was an issue.
The Floyd family says it believes what happened on May 25th was, in part, personal.
Is there any doubt in your mind that Derek Chauvin knew George Floyd?
No, he knew him.
How well?
We interfaced with officers.
How well did he know him?
I would say pretty well.
Maya Santamaria, the owner of the now torched club, described how Chauvin treated black patrons when she talked to us for the upcoming CBS News special, Justice for All. Do you think Derek had a problem with black people?
I think he was afraid and intimidated.
By black folks?
Yeah.
This boggles the mind from a factual standpoint, but because we're all lawyers, let's get to the heart of the legal matter. Do it. With this information, do you think that we can see an upgrade in charges? Because we've seen it go from murder 3 to murder 2. Do you think it can go from murder 2 to murder 1? And now, is there a potential for hate crime charges based on this information?
I do believe that there is a great potential for this to be upgraded to a first-degree murder a charge, as well as hate crime. We found out about a week ago that Chauvin had worked at the same nightclub, or had moonlighted at the same nightclub that George Floyd had worked at, and that the owner believed that that Mr. Chauvin had been heavy-handed with some of the patrons there. Now, look, before I was a lawyer, I also used to perform in a hip-hop group in college and nightclubs. And one thing I'll know is that the owners aren't sitting around at the nightclubs. So there's only one way that the owner would have gotten that information told to her, and that would be if some staff there at the club had let her know that Chauvin was being a little heavy-handed. That led me to believe that, these two had to know each other, because the security folks are the people who would say that, right? Which George was. I think absolutely it could be a first-degree charge, and depending upon, whether or not there's real evidence of him having some type of racial animus, you could see a hate crime, but a hate crime might be a little of a stretch right now.
Robotics, let's go straight to the murder question. Do you think that this information can upgrade from murder 2 to murder 1 for the prosecutor?
I think it very well will, and it's all I keep thinking about is 404B evidence. I think this trial, if this evidence is investigated and found to be credible, absolutely brings it to a first degree. The interesting question is how they're going to substantiate these claims for the prosecution. I mean, this is a case where the prosecution better take it one step at a time and make sure the evidence is airtight and credible. They're going to need that for this prosecution. From a defense standpoint, it's going to be interesting, because hearing that, I'm sure, is going to put lawyers in a position who are defending this officer to see where this all came from and how it's going to affect, but it could be heavily weighed against the defendant in this case.
So this next clip you're going to see, I think I can speak for all of us, as defense attorneys, disgusted us because of how this defense attorney is handling this officer's case. But at the same time, it seems like he's just kind of throwing him to the lions, and maybe we're going to see the justice that we want. Let's take a look at this defense attorney, Earl Grey, who spoke about his client and his client's case, that being the officer who specifically held down George Floyd's legs. Maybe the least culpable of all the officers, unless you compare that to the officer who's just standing there. But he kind of throws his client out to the wolves. Let's take a listen to what he said.
If all of these people say, why didn't my client intercede? Well, if the public is there and they're so in an uproar about this, they didn't intercede either. And my client's down where he can't really see.
Hold on, Counselor, hold on.
Yes,
Two things. One, yes. You're laying on a man's legs. You've got a fine view of what's going on with that man. The other officer is literally a foot in front of you on his neck. Two, I understand that he has a senior officer telling him what to do, but there's also a duty to intervene. And if you think an officer is doing something that's dangerous to a civilian, you have a duty to intervene. And he did not intervene. And the idea that the civilians should have rushed in to a policing situation in the inner city of Minneapolis against 4 police officers that have weapons and are kneeling on the neck of a man, don't you think that's asking a little much of civilians and a little too little of your client?
Absolutely. I just brought that up. But what you say is that he's a foot away. Look at the video. He's got his feet. He was holding his feet down. Officer King was next, and then Chauvin.
Let me say what Chris Cuomo cannot or probably will not say. If Officer Chauvin is willing and capable to kill an African-American man who is pinned down and handcuffed in broad daylight under surveillance, then he is going to kill me if I try to stop him. There is no doubt in my mind that when he passed out, he being Floyd, and those people came forward, you can see Officer Chauvin pull out his mace. You think that those bystanders would be safe if they tried to stop him? Ridiculous argument. I cannot imagine he made this in public or even behind closed doors. Now, we have Vincent Velasquez, who's going to be joining us and keeping the peace. I want Vincent to jump in on this one. Vincent, maybe it's just a dumb, off-the-cuff argument by a lawyer, but we're not advocating that citizens should start physically policing other officers. That just seems like anarchy, and it's going to exacerbate the issue. What are your thoughts?
No doubt. First of all, like, if I ever need an attorney, Earl Grey would not be the person I would hire. I'd stick with drinking the tea because what he said was 100% ridiculous. To think that a citizen would jump in or expect a citizen to jump in and risk life and limb, we probably would have 2 homicides that day instead of just George Floyd. So that is absurd that he would suggest that.
Yeah, so it's Mike Robotics, just briefly, I'm going to have you say the same as well. What are your thoughts about that comment? We got maybe like 15 seconds.
Unbelievable and clearly not in his best interest of the client.
Do it. I'm going to give you a few moments as well to comment on what you just saw as well as a civil rights attorney and a defense attorney out there in California. What do you make of those comments?
Irresponsible. It's shocking that he would say that, especially on national TV. It makes you wonder whether or not he is feeding his client to the wolves, if you will. No way can you invite the public to kind of police the police in that fashion. Of course, there's mechanisms and means to do it. Out on the streets is not. You got rights in court. It's better to be alive than to be dead right.
It's better to be alive than dead right. Those are powerful words. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to leave you in the hands of Vincent Velasquez. This is Brian Buckmire signing off for Justice and Peace. We'll see you tomorrow.